mentality in this one. Let's do some T1 talk, because you did a bit on Doran there. Like, the real problem here is, like, I'll tell you where we'll start the discussion. Right? I do believe in general in esports, you should talk about 5-man lineups. Like, I do think even changing one player can sometimes be incredibly drastic as to what it does. I mean, a classic example would be just consider when they changed out perks for Reckless. In theory, Reckless was as good or better in ADC, but the whole team was worse as a team for other factors, right? But I do also think when you talk about the idea of a core, like 3 players, for example, who've been there a whole bunch of times, you can see certain things play out. Like, this isn't just about Doran and Zeus. Like, even with Doran in, this team still does have a clutch factor, bro. Like, they do have, like, intangible aspects where somehow they perform in the moment where you're not expecting them to, or they bounce back with an interesting draft. By the way, they still do a lot of that shit too, which is they still do some very interesting drafting work. Funny thing is, I actually even think that's probably an underrated part of this tournament. Bro, think of this tournament. They might actually have had the best drafting of any of the coaches. Like, they got into a lot of good Game 5 drafts, a lot of, like, late games that looked good. They just sometimes players fucked it up. Like, what did you think in general about T1? I was kind of like pleasantly surprised. Like, this is almost like the best moments of the LCK all came out internationally.
No, I think that the big contrasting difference for me with the Doran version and the Zeus version is that Doran is a lot more incorporated in the game at every point in time. Zeus always played in isolation, and then he showed up on Drakes with 2 items, 3 items, and just found crazy flanks and engages and pressured the enemy beyond belief. And the goal was, can Zeus farm? And can we pressure enough on the other side of the map so they don't have time to pressure him? Because if not, he will get ganked and he will die. That's basically how T1 played with his counter picks. He was very, very isolated. With Doran, there's a lot of synergy between him and Owner. In the early games, they get ahead, they find dives, they find pressure angles, which is super cool to see. And Doran finds these ROM timers into Drake when he's 6, whether it's with Ornn or Renekton. He hovers on like through and through. And T1 is playing as a collective more than ever, because the Zeus variant was always, they are mechanically insane, and then they're gonna clutch it out in the team fights. And Owner would play in isolation. Keria would have to put wards on his on his lonesome, and then Faker and Zeus would just try to like survive on side pretty much. And then if you got to 20 minutes, you just knew that T1 was just better on the objective. But this team plays collectively so different, and I think the incorporation of Doran has been so neatly done. I just want to give praise to what I assume the coaching staff is like. The introduction of Mata into here, this is how I always imagine it. It's like the introduction of Mata, we see jungle support synergy, I talked about it a lot here, but also just the overall synergy of the squad in terms of how they move together on the map and get advantages. That is very different from past versions of T1, which I think is super, super cool to see. I think this team lives and dies by Keria, Owner, and Doran, surprisingly, because like Doran actually had some good performances on carry champs, whether it was the Renekton or like Ambessa. Yeah, actually had good performances on carry champs, which I think is very impressive. But I do think that Gumayusi and Faker, I think their performance, it's a little bit too much on the end of if the draft skews towards them, I don't expect them to be able to put out like the game-winning performance in my mind. I think with Faker, he had great Orianna performances, and I think that when he played mages to stabilize the matchup, it was good because he didn't die to every gank then. But I think that Gumayusi's role on this team is more about just being stable, and that's fine sometimes, but then you don't get performances like we got out of Ruler or maybe Hope or even Doggo in terms of like really stepping up to the plate. He had definitely great performances with like Lucian, Xayah for sure, and I think Gumayusi is an impressive ADC, but I do think that T1 still, they don't have that role depth as Gen.G do. I don't think anyone does. So comparing them to Gen.G is a tough one. I think T1 is still like what they managed to do from losing to Nong Shim in the regular split and then going into playoffs with that in mind. And then now, taking Gen.G to Game 5 twice, I think is insanely impressive. And they really managed to make the team cohesion stick because they didn't have any. They really didn't have any for the majority of spring. So I'm very impressed with the run, and I think they should be, proud and happy, even though I'm sure all they care about is winning. But maybe they sit there and say, actually, this MSI doesn't matter. It's only about Worlds that matters. And they cope themselves like the fans do.
They almost played as well as they could anyway, if you look at how they played this year. Like, I'm with you, by the way. The reason why Gen.G is so terrifying to me is, bro, this roster does look like it can be better than the one last year that was like doing all undefeated shit, etc. Because if you remember the team last year, it was actually more T1-ish. They had their style of play and no one could figure out how to beat it. So they just kept doing that style. The problem is that never made it to Worlds. By the time they got to Worlds, they just did the usual thing of like, right, fuck, change our whole champion pool and style of play because they'd lost already. I'm with you. This Gen.G can win in so many different ways in League. It's unfair, mate. And then as we're talking about, this isn't just like it's Gen.G and Chovy has to be like a 10 out of 10. Mate, he can have a game where he's a 6 out of 10 and they can win because Ruler's there, Keen's there, Canyon's impossibly good. The Duro guy, shouldn't he? He doesn't even have to be good and he is good. Like, this team is crazy stacked. I actually do think, like, I'm mega hyped for the idea this team can win Worlds, Gen.G. Like, it looks plausible. But then on the T1 side, here's the thing. Obviously, this did happen a little bit last year. They had the EWC win, but then they shit the bed in summer. So somehow they arrived at Worlds, obviously, like, as the 4th seed and all that shit. Like, if you look right now, this is way better than last year's MSI. Remember, last year's MSI was where they almost got rocked by G2 twice. BLG just handled them, and then everything got to play Gen.G. This one, they not only could have won this thing, as of right now, and I never thought I'd say this about the Doran lineup at T1, T1 could win Worlds too. For reals, like, if the performance I saw here, mate, they could fuck around and have won this tournament. So, like, it's actually kind of hype for T1 if they're going to go to Worlds after this. Like, obviously, we'll see with EWC and LCK summer, maybe they fuck it up. But as of right now, you can be pretty hyped that, like, this could be amazingly, actually, the meme is the Doran lineup at T1 could win Worlds too, bro. Maybe it can happen.
Oh, definitely. I think we have seen an evolution in Doran, and I think he's performing super well. And I think that, looking at the change, because I think there was this discussion. I remember, like, when we watched the first Gen.G How I Life matchup, like, this was early in winter in the LCK Cup, and we saw there was this game where they picked like full tank topside and then Jinx on Ruler, and then back then we were saying, oh, this is why they signed Ruler, to add that layer of depth. And for the longest time, I remember there was this discussion about how Ruler was a downgrade from Paze, but Paze in a fearless format, when series would go to 5 games, like, this is the moment where you realize this is why we signed Ruler. It's like, yes, you don't need a player that is going to drill and dominate regular split, because that's what Paze does. Like, he just drops mad volume, but then his final games were always just a little bit disappointing.
Basically, he did this split. If you didn't watch the LPL guys, he was mega in the whole split, and then the playoffs, he just kind of whatever, wasn't he?
Yeah. It's like, I remember when he got like caught by the scanner and so forth, and I really like that Gen.G brought Ruler back, and they saw the value in him, because that's such a crucial thing that like, that people judge players wrong depending on circumstance in a lot of cases. It's like you don't go from being the best player in the world 2023 into being suddenly bad. Like, it's just circumstances really matter, and I'm so happy to see Ruler step up. But on the point of T1 being competitive coming into Worlds, I think that's very real. I think this roster is very good. I think that for Fearless, it's also super good. It's like, now we can tangibly measure teams that are good in Fearless and not in Fearless. I think the metrics are very obvious, and just having depth of play, which is super important. I think what T1 did this competition, I think, was clever, because they really leaned heavy into just picking champions they're comfortable with. I think especially in that game 5, I think everyone, including me, just thought, oh, Gen.G, what did you just draft here? This on paper looks awful. But they were so damn comfortable. They were so damn comfortable. And in the end, maybe that's the main thing that matters. And I think T1 really leaned into that in this competition with their champion choices, which I think just is super important. And I think coming into the World Championship, like I mentioned it before, like, it's going to be a tough year for the LPL, but simply because LPL is rebuilding a lot of shit at the same time, and also LCK just landed with 3 teams that are just insane. I know everyone might think How Alive is bad now, but trust me, they aren't. That was one series, and maybe WC, they will fuck around and win it, maybe. Like, that's entirely possible with How Alive.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.